All right, welcome back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn truly you didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
I pulled the car into the driveway and cut the engine before anyone inside could hear it. The hood clicked as it cooled. I stayed seated, hands on the wheel, feeling the grit under my fingernails and the tight pull in my shoulders that never really went away. The house looked the same as it always had: fresh paint, trimmed hedges, the kind of place that tried very hard to look successful. Music thumped faintly through the walls. Laughter spilled out every time the front door opened. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. No makeup, hair pulled back, plain jacket, plain boots, no medals, no ribbons, just a name tape sewn inside the collar where no one could see it. I stepped out and shut the door quietly. The old hinges complaining like they always did. That sound alone felt like an announcement. Inside, the smell of catered food hit me first. Champagne, grilled meat, something sweet and expensive. The living room was packed. People I recognized, people I didn't. Phones already out recording everything that moved. In the middle of it all stood my sister, Tiffany Carter, glowing under ring lights like she was born with a filter attached to her face. "Tiff, the lighting here is perfect," someone said. "I know, right?" she laughed, tilting her head just enough for the camera. "Make sure you get Brad when he walks in." Brad, the guest of honor, the almost husband. The reason for the party. He was off to the side wearing a tailored jacket and the confident smile of a man who had practiced it in the mirror. Someone introduced him as a military man, and he nodded like he'd just been promoted on the spot. I slipped in along the wall, invisible on purpose. I'd learned how to do that a long time ago. Tiffany noticed me anyway. She always did. Her smile froze for half a second before reshaping itself into something sharp. "Oh my God," she said loudly. "You actually showed up." A few heads turned. A few phones tilted my way. "This is my sister, Sarah," Tiffany announced, wrapping an arm around my shoulder like we were close. "She's been away 5 years," my mother added, appearing at Tiffany's side. "No calls, no posts, no updates. We hardly knew where she was." I nodded once. "Good to see you too." Tiffany's eyes flicked down my clothes. So she said, dragging the word out, "What rank are you now?" I shrugged. "Still working." Brad leaned in, curious. "You Army, something like that." He laughed. "Man, you don't look it. No offense. I mean, where's the uniform?" "The medals?" "I don't wear them to parties." That got a few chuckles. Tiffany's smile widened. "See, Brad's in the reserves," she said, tapping his arm. "They're grooming him for big things. Leadership, visibility, you know." Brad straightened a little. "And Sarah," Tiffany went on, "well, and Pat, she does logistics, or cleaning, something on base, I think." Someone snorted. Another person laughed too loud. I felt a familiar pressure build behind my eyes. I let it pass. Tiffany reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded bill. "Here," she said, pressing a $20 note against my chest. "Why don't you go buy something nice? We might need an extra pair of hands serving drinks at the wedding." The bill slid down my jacket and fluttered to the floor. The room went quiet in that way people get when they're not sure if they're supposed to be uncomfortable yet. I bent down, picked up the money, and handed it back to her. "Keep it," I said. "Looks like you'll need it." A few eyebrows lifted. Tiffany laughed, waving it off. "Oh my God, you're still so sensitive." I slipped my hand into my pocket and felt the edge of the black card there. Solid, cold, real. I didn't take it out. My father cleared his throat. "Sarah, your sister's just joking. You know how she is." I nodded. "I do." Brad raised his glass. "No hard feelings, right? Military's military. We all serve in our own way." "Sure," I said. "Some louder than others." Tiffany didn't catch that. Or maybe she did and chose not to. She was already turning back to the camera, explaining how Brad had basically put his life on hold for the country. Comments rolled in on her screen. Hearts, flags, fire emojis. The works. I moved toward the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter. My mother followed me, lowering her voice. "You could have dressed up a bit," she said. "People are watching, I know. This is important for Tiffany. For the family, I know," she sighed. "Your father and I just don't understand why you chose such a quiet path." I took a sip of water. It worked for me. She looked unconvinced. From across the room, Tiffany raised her phone again. "Everyone say hi to my sister," she called out. "She's back from playing soldier." A few half-hearted waves followed. I looked around the room. At the furniture my grandmother used to polish by hand. At the walls that used to hold her photos. At the people who had no idea whose house they were standing in. or what had been traded away to keep it looking like this. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness. More like a decision clicking into place. Have you ever walked into a room knowing you could outthink everyone there, but still got treated like the help because you didn't look the part they expected? I finished my water and set the bottle down. Tiffany was still talking, still shining. Brad was still smiling. My parents were still nodding along. I stayed right where I was quiet, watching, letting them enjoy the moment they thought they owned. I followed the sound of my father's voice down the hall, my boots quiet against the polished floor. The music faded behind me. His office door was half open, light spilling out in a thin line. I paused there, listening to the scrape of a chair, the shuffle of papers, the dry cough he made when he was nervous. "Just sign it here," a man said. I didn't recognize the voice. Calm, professional, the kind that charged by the hour. "I don't see another option," my father replied. "We need this closed before the end of the quarter." I stepped inside without knocking. 3 heads turned. My father seated at his desk. My mother standing behind him with her arms crossed, and a man in a gray suit with a leather folder open in front of them. The desk looked different, too clean. The framed photo of my grandmother was gone. "Sarah," my father said, surprised but not annoyed. "We're in the middle of something. I can see that," I said. My eyes went to the paperwork. Numbers, dates, signatures. The word transferred jumped out at me. The man in the suit stood. "I'll give you a moment," he said, already packing up. He nodded at me politely and left. The silence that followed felt heavier than the party noise outside. "What's being transferred?" I asked. My mother answered before my father could. "Assets." "Which ones?" She hesitated. "Property, investments." I looked around the room again. The missing photo, the bare wall. "Did you sell Grandma's house?" My father leaned back, exhaling like he'd been waiting for this. "It was just sitting there," he said. "Empty, costing money." "That house wasn't empty," I said. "It was hers." "And now it's helping your sister," my mother snapped. "Which is what family does." I laughed once, short, sharp. "You sold her house." "To buy the penthouse," my father said. "Yes." There it was, clean and simple, no apology, no hesitation. "For Tiffany," I said. "For her future," my mother corrected. New York isn't cheap. I pictured the old place, the creaky stairs, the backyard where my grandmother used to drink tea every morning, the attic full of boxes no one had touched since the funeral, all of it reduced to a line item. "And the will?" I asked. My father's jaw tightened. "You're not listed." I nodded slowly. "Why?" He spread his hands. "Your career, Bob. It doesn't add value to the family name. Tiffany's platform does. Her marriage does. So I don't count." "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." My mother stepped closer. "You chose to disappear," she said. 5 years, no presence, no proof of success. We had to make practical decisions. I glanced at the desk again. Another document caught my eye. A familiar emblem on the corner of a folder. My grandfather's unit patch. Old, faded. "What's that?" I asked. My father followed my gaze. "Just memorabilia." "You sold his things too," I said. It wasn't a question. We kept what mattered, my mother said. I opened the folder without asking. Inside were certificates, commendations, a folded flag receipt, all marked as collateral. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. "You used his service record to get better loan terms." My father didn't deny it. "That ring Tiffany's wearing," I said. "The one she keeps flashing at the camera." "It's symbolic," my mother said quickly. "It was his," I said. "He earned it." My father stood. "Enough. We're done discussing this." "Are we?" I asked. "Because I see debt schedules here that don't look symbolic at all." He stiffened. "You don't understand how finances work." "I understand numbers," I said. "These are bad ones." My mother crossed her arms again. "We're handling it," with what I asked. "Likes and comments." Her face flushed. "Watch your tone. I'm watching the math," I said. "You're over-leveraged. You sold off everything solid to keep up appearances." My father reached for the papers, stacking them quickly. "This is not your concern. You made it my concern when you used my name as a tax shield," I said. Both of them froze. What my mother said. I pointed to a document near the bottom of the stack. "That one. You listed me as an overseas dependent. Claimed exemptions based on my deployment status." My father swallowed. "It's legal. It's risky," I said. "And sloppy." He sat back down suddenly, looking older. We did what we had to do. For Tiffany, I said again. From the hallway, laughter burst out as someone popped another bottle. The sound felt wrong in this room. My mother softened her voice. You'll be fine, she said. You're resourceful. You always were. I closed the folder and slid it back across the desk. You sold the past to rent the future, I said. And you put it all in her name. My father didn't argue. That told me everything. I turned to leave. At the door, I stopped and looked back at the empty wall where my grandmother's photo used to hang. She deserved better, I said. No one answered. I stepped back into the noise of the party, the music hitting me all at once. Tiffany was mid-live stream laughing, showing off the ring again. The diamond caught the light. It looked expensive. It looked hollow. I stood there unnoticed, watching my family celebrate something built on things they didn't earn and debts they didn't understand. My hand went back to my pocket. The black card pressed against my palm, steady as ever. I stayed in the house long after the party noise thinned out, moving only when everyone else was too distracted to notice. The kitchen lights were still on. A bowl of half-eaten fruit sat on the counter, flies already circling. Tiffany's phone charger dangled from the wall, forgotten. I reached behind the microwave and adjusted the small camera I'd placed there earlier, angling it just enough to catch the table in the doorway. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was confirming. The next morning, I drove across town to a branch I'd never used before. No uniforms, no recognition. Just a quiet office and a woman behind glass who typed fast and didn't ask personal questions. I slid my ID across the counter and asked for a copy of my credit history, the full one. She frowned at the screen. You've been busy, she said. I haven't, I replied. She printed the pages and handed them to me with a look that said she wasn't buying my calm. Lines of debt stared back at me. Short-term loans, high interest, multiple signatures, all dated while I'd been overseas. That's not mine, I said. She tapped one line. The signature matches. It's forged, I said. She shrugged. Then you'll want a lawyer. I already had one. I stepped outside and made a call from the car. One ring, then a voice I hadn't heard in months. I was wondering when you'd check, he said. I have the paperwork, I told him. She signed my name. Of course she did, he said. She needed speed, not permission. I closed my eyes for a second. How bad enough to ruin you if you stay quiet, he said. Not bad enough to scare me. I hung up and drove back to the house. By the time I parked, Tiffany's car was already there. So was my mother's. I didn't go inside right away. I watched from across the street, engine off, windows down. Through the camera feed on my phone, I saw them sit at the kitchen table. My mother poured coffee. Tiffany paced. She knows something, Tiffany said. I can tell. She doesn't know enough, my mother replied. And even if she did, no one would believe her. Tiffany stopped pacing. What if she talks? She won't, my mother said. She doesn't want trouble. I smiled without meaning to. Tiffany leaned on the counter. The loans are due soon. We'll handle it, my mother said. There's still her insurance. Tiffany's voice dropped. You mean if she has another episode? Don't say it like that, my mother snapped. She's unstable. Everyone knows that. 5 years gone, no records, no social media, it's believable. My jaw tightened. And the doctor, Tiffany asked. He owes us, my mother said. He'll sign the evaluation, so we get her committed, Tiffany said slowly. Temporary hold. We take control. And the policy pays out, my mother finished. There it was, clean, planned, said out loud like they were discussing groceries. I clipped the recording and saved it twice. When I walked into the kitchen, they both jumped. How long have you been standing there? Tiffany asked. Long enough, I said. My mother forced a smile. You startled us. I heard everything I said. About the loans, the signatures, the plan. Tiffany laughed too fast. You're imagining things. I placed the printed credit report on the table. That's my name, I said. I was on another continent. My mother scanned the pages, then looked up. We did what we had to do. For yourself, I said. Tiffany crossed her arms. You wouldn't understand. You don't live in the real world. I leaned forward. You borrowed against my future, she scoffed. You don't have one. My mother reached for my arm. Sarah, please, let's not make this ugly, I pulled away. You already did. That afternoon, I found the notice taped inside my old bedroom door. An appointment slip. Psychiatric evaluation. Mandatory. I took it down and folded it carefully. By evening, 2 men in plain clothes knocked. Polite, smiling, papers in hand. Sarah Carter, one asked. "That's me. We're here to escort you for a brief evaluation." I glanced past them at my mother, who stood in the hallway wringing her hands. Tiffany hovered behind her phone ready. "I'll go," I said. They looked surprised. Inside the car, the younger one tried small talk. I stared out the window. At the facility, they led me to a quiet room. Soft chairs, no sharp edges. A woman with a clipboard smiled like she'd practiced it. "We just want to ask a few questions," she said. I answered them, calm, direct, no emotion to grab onto. After 20 minutes, she excused herself. I waited. My phone buzzed once. A message. One word, handled. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. The woman's smile was gone. "There seems to be a mistake," she said. "You're free to go." Outside, the 2 men avoided my eyes. When I got back to the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. My mother sat at the table, pale. Tiffany stood by the sink, shaking. "They can't do that," Tiffany said when she saw me. "They can't just let you go." "They can," I said. And they did. My mother looked up. "What did you do?" I listened, I said. "And I made a call." Tiffany lunged toward me, stopping short. "You think you're so smart?" I met her stare. "I think you're sloppy." I walked past them and into the living room where the last of the party decorations still lay half-packed. Confetti crunched under my boots. Behind me, no one followed. I brushed confetti off my sleeve and checked the message again. Location, time, charity shoot, public. The kind of event that pretended to be about veterans while quietly auditioning egos. I replied with a single word and put the phone away. The range sat on the edge of town, clean and overbuilt, with banners flapping in the wind and a line of trucks that cost more than my car. Volunteers in matching polos handed out ear protection like party favors. A local news van idled near the gate. This was going to be loud in more ways than one. Brad found me before I found Elaine. "Sarah," he said, grinning like we were old friends. "Didn't think you'd show." "I was invited," I said. "I show up when invited." He laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "This'll be fun. Good exposure. The department's here. A couple of senior guys, too." I followed his gaze. A cluster of uniforms stood near the bench's talking shop. Badges caught the sun. Someone important was always watching at events like this. That was the point. Tiffany appeared with her phone already live. "Guys, look who decided to come out and play," she said to her audience. "My sister's finally stepping into the real military world." I put on ear protection and didn't answer. Brad leaned closer. "We're doing a friendly challenge," he said, "just to loosen things up." "What kind?" I asked. "Time drills, accuracy, little movement, ranger stuff." I nodded. "Okay." He blinked. Really?" Tiffany's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, you're serious?" I picked up a rental rifle from the rack and checked it the way I always did. Chamber, safety, weight, balance, familiar enough. Brad watched, amused. "You sure you don't want something lighter? Start easy, I'm good." He laughed and turned to the small crowd forming behind the line. "All right, folks, friendly competition, for charity." Applause followed. Phones came up. Tiffany angled herself to keep my hands in frame. Brad went first. He talked while he loaded. About training weekends, about instructors, about how discipline carried over into life. His shots were loud and fast, decent grouping, not special. He finished with a flourish and raised his arms. "Cheers!" Tiffany zoomed in on his smile. "Beat that," she said, swinging the camera toward me. I stepped to the line and adjusted the sling without thinking. The range officer nodded. "Shooter ready," nodded back. I didn't rush. I didn't pose. I settled in and let the noise drop away. The targets were standard, distances marked, wind light, easy variables. The first shot cracked clean. The second followed before the echo faded. I moved through the sequence the way my body remembered, not the way a crowd expected. Controlled, efficient, no wasted motion. Someone stopped talking behind me. I finished and cleared the weapon. The range officer stared at the target monitor, then at me. "That can't be right," Brad said, stepping closer. The officer checked again. "New record for this setup," he said flatly. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Phones tilted. Tiffany's smile faltered. "Do it again," Brad said, laughing too hard. "Must have been a fluke." I reloaded and went again. Slower this time. Tighter grouping. Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. One of the senior officers approached, eyes sharp. "Where did you train?" he asked. "Where I was sent," I said. Brad cleared his throat. She doesn't usually shoot, he said. I mean, not like this. Tiffany swung the camera back to me. Say something, she whispered. This is great content. I looked straight into the lens. Don't confuse silence with weakness. The chat exploded. Tiffany glanced down, reading fast, trying to keep up. Brad forced a grin. Guess you've been holding out. Guess you've been talking, I said. The officer nodded once. You available for a demo, he asked. Not today. He studied me for a beat longer, then stepped back. Brad laughed again, louder. All right, let's wrap this up, but it didn't wrap. People ask questions. Quiet ones. Real ones. Tiffany drifted away to answer comments, her voice tight. Brad stayed planted, watching me like I'd changed shape. A volunteer handed me a bottle of water. Nice shooting, he said. Thanks. Brad leaned in. You trying to embarrass me? I didn't say your name, I said. You knew this was my event. You invited me. His jaw clenched. You could have missed. I don't miss. He stepped back, hands up. No offense. Some taken, I said. Tiffany reappeared, phone lowered now. We should go, she said to Brad. People are being weird. He nodded, eyes still on me. We'll talk later. Sure, I said. They left in a hurry, her heels clicking too fast, his smile gone. The crowd thinned. The banners kept flapping. The news van pulled away without stopping. I returned the rifle and signed the log. The range officer slid it back to me. You're welcome anytime, he said. I know. Outside, the sun dipped lower. I walked to my car and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. My phone buzzed once. A new message. No name. Just coordinates and a time window. I started the engine and pulled out, the sound of gunfire, fading behind me as the road opened up ahead. I parked across the street and watched the lights flicker on, one by one, in the penthouse windows. The building looked expensive in the way money tries to look permanent. Glass steel height. A statement. I checked the time, then stepped out of the car and crossed the street with a folded envelope under my arm. The doorman barely glanced at me. I didn't belong to his mental list of problems. That helped. Inside, the elevator hummed softly as it climbed. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored wall. Same plain jacket, same calm face. When the doors opened, laughter spilled into the hallway. Champagne again, music again. Same celebration, just relocated. I didn't go in right away. I walked to the far end of the hall and taped the notice to the door across from theirs first. Clean, flat, impossible to miss. Then I walked back and did the same to their door. The paper stuck without complaint. I turned and left. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone started vibrating. I ignored it until I was back in the car. The first call was my father. What did you do? He demanded without greeting. I delivered paperwork, I said. What paperwork, official? I said. You should read it. Silence. Then muffled voices. A door opening. Paper tearing. Oh my God, my mother's voice cut in. Richard, what is this? My father came back on the line, breath shallow. Foreclosure, that's not possible. It is, I said. And it's happening. This is some kind of mistake, he said. We're current. You were, I said, before your debt was purchased. Purchased by who? My mother asked in the background. A company, I said. Chimera Holdings. My father cursed under his breath. I've never heard of them. They've heard of you, I said. I'm calling the bank, he snapped. Do that, I said. I hung up before he could say more. The second call came from Tiffany. She didn't bother pretending. You did this, she said. You're trying to scare us. I don't scare, I said. I notify. My card just got declined, she hissed. I was paying a deposit. That happens, I said. When accounts are frozen, she laughed sharp and brittle. You think this is funny, no, I said. I think it's accurate. There was a crash on her end. Voices shouting, someone crying. You don't have this kind of power, she said. You're nobody. I looked out at the building, all glass and reflection. You'd be surprised what nobody can do. She hung up. I drove home slowly, letting the city breathe around me. When I pulled into the old driveway, the house was dark. My parents' car wasn't there. They were still fighting fires somewhere else. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where plans had been made, where signatures had been forged, where they'd decided I was expendable. My phone buzzed again, a text from my father this time. The bank says the loan was sold, it read. They won't talk to us. I typed back. They don't have to. Another pause. Then what do you want? I didn't answer right away. An hour later, headlights swept across the wall. Doors slammed. The front door flew open. My parents rushed in, faces pale, coats half on. Tiffany followed mascara-streaked phone clutched like a weapon. "This is your fault," she shouted as soon as she saw me. "You set us up." I stood. "Sit down." "No," she said. "You don't get to sit," I said again. She stopped. My mother pulled her into a chair. My father leaned out the counter. "Talk," he said. "Now." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I placed it on the table and slid it toward him. "Your debt," I said. "All of it. Mortgages, lines of credit, the short-term loans you forgot to mention." He flipped through the pages, hands shaking. "You're $5 million in the hole," I said. "And counting." "That's impossible," my mother whispered. "It's documented," I said. "And it's due." Tiffany shot to her feet. "You can't do this. I have a wedding." I looked at her. "You have a balance," she scoffed. "I'll call the police." For what I asked. "Bad math." My father looked up. "Chimera Holdings," he said slowly. "That's you." I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. "You have 24 hours, I said. "Pay in full or the property transfers." My mother stood. "Where are we supposed to get that kind of money?" I shrugged. "You're creative." Tiffany laughed high and unhinged. "You're bluffing." I met her eyes. "Call your card company again." She did. The color drained from her face as she listened. "You ruined everything," she said. "No," I said. "You did." I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening. My father sank into a chair. "Why?" he asked. "Why go this far?" I thought about the house, the ring, the paperwork, the kitchen table. "Because you taught me what family means," I said. And I paid attention. They stared at me like I'd changed languages. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. "Sarah," my mother called. "Please." I paused but didn't turn around. "You still have time," I said. "Use it wisely." I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face. Behind me, the house buzzed with panic phones ringing, plans unraveling. I got in the car and drove off, the city lights blurring together as I checked the time and headed toward my next stop. I was halfway through a cup of bad coffee when Tiffany slammed a garment bag onto the table in front of me. The zipper rattled like it was angry. "You're wearing this," she said. I looked down at the bag. Cheap fabric, black and white, made of honor without the honor. "Good morning to you too." My mother hovered behind her house, eyes darting between us. "Just do it," she said quietly. "Please." Tiffany crossed her arms. "If you want Dad's accounts unfrozen, you're going to help today." I stood there for a second, letting the words land. Then I nodded. "Fine." They both blinked. "Really?" Tiffany asked. No attitude. "Not today," I said. She smiled, relief and suspicion mixing badly. "Good. Hair's at 9, makeup at 10. Don't mess this up." She tossed the bag at me. I caught it and headed for the guest room without another word. Inside, I hung the dress on the back of the door and locked it. Then I took out my phone. The first call canceled the florist. Calm voice, correct account number, authorized signature. The second call paused the catering delivery. Temporary hold. Compliance confirmed. The third call voided the live band's contract. Breach clause, payment reversed. I worked methodically the way I always did. No rush, no drama, just confirmations and timestamps. By 9, the house was buzzing. Stylists arrived, boxes piled up. Tiffany sat in front of a mirror, already complaining. "Why does my foundation look yellow?" she snapped. "It doesn't," the makeup artist said. "It does on camera." I stood behind her, adjusting a clip. "Hold still." She eyed me through the mirror. "Don't get ideas," she said. "I know what you're capable of." "So do I said. She snorted. "You're a helper today. Don't forget it." I smiled and kept working. By noon, the phone calls started coming in. "The flowers are late," my mother said, pacing. "They'll be here," Tiffany said. "Relax." The caterer called again. Tiffany answered this time. Her smile slipped as she listened. "What do you mean canceled?" she hissed. "That's impossible." I tied a ribbon and said nothing. The band manager called next, then the rental company, then the planner. Tiffany's voice climbed with each call. "Fix it," she snapped at everyone. "Do you know who I am?" I stepped back as she stood, phone shaking in her hand. "You," she said, pointing at me. "What did you do?" I met her eyes. "You wanted help." My mother gasped. "Sarah, stop this. Stop what I asked. The contracts were under my name." "That's not true," Tiffany said. I pulled up the documents on my phone and showed her. "You were busy," I signed. Her face went pale. "You can't just, I said. I did." Brad arrived an hour later, already irritated. "What's going on?" he asked. "The venue's empty," Tiffany rounded on him. She sabotaged everything. Brad looked at me. Is that true? Yes, I said. He laughed once. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's efficient. He stepped closer. You're done, he said. I'll call the police. For what I asked. Canceling my own contracts. He stopped. Outside the venue grounds looked wrong. No flowers, no chairs, just bare grass and mud from last night's rain. Guests started arriving, heels, sinking, confusion spreading. Tiffany stood at the entrance screaming into her phone. Fix this, I don't care how. My mother grabbed my arm. You've made your point, she whispered. Undo it. I pulled free. You taught me leverage, I said. I'm using it. Brad stormed off to take another call. Tiffany sank into a chair, shaking. You're ruining my life, she said. I leaned down so only she could hear me. You rented it. You didn't own it. She slapped the armrest. I invited you into my wedding. You dragged me into it, I said. Guests clustered, murmuring. Phones came out. The story was already escaping. A coordinator approached me, flustered. Are we proceeding? I looked around at the empty space. As planned, I said. Tiffany overheard and lunged. Get out, she screamed. Get out of my sight. I stepped back calmly. I'll change. I went upstairs, locked the door, and took the dress off. It landed in a heap on the floor. I washed my hands, slow and deliberate, and changed into something else. Silk, black, simple. When I came back down, the house felt smaller, tighter, every sound sharp. Tiffany saw me and froze. What are you wearing? Something appropriate, I said. She laughed, hysterical. You think you're the main character now? I glanced outside at the crowd, the mud, the empty space. I think this is your day, I said. I'm just respecting it. Brad returned, face flushed. The police are on their way, he said. This ends now. Good, I said. My mother sank into a chair. This has gone too far. I checked the time, still on schedule. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance. Guests whispered. Phones recorded. The ground stayed bare. I stood near the entrance, hands folded, watching Tiffany pace herself into pieces as the world she'd built on, borrowed names and borrowed money, finally started asking questions. I stepped through the entrance as the shouting peaked the silk of my dress, quiet against the noise. Conversations stalled when people noticed I wasn't wearing what Tiffany had thrown at me earlier. Heads turned, phones followed. The room adjusted its attention without asking permission. Tiffany saw me and froze. You can't be here like that, she said, voice cracking. This is my wedding. I walked past her and set the manila envelope on the signing table right where the officiant would have stood if there had been an officiant. The envelope made a soft sound when it hit the wood. It was heavy enough to matter. Brad scoffed. What's this supposed to be, paperwork, I said. The kind that doesn't care about your timeline. He laughed and looked around for backup. A few people laughed with him. Most didn't. I opened the envelope and slid the first packet across the table. Those are copies, I said. The originals are already filed. Tiffany rushed forward. Don't touch that, she snapped, grabbing at the papers. I moved them just out of reach. Relax, it's your handwriting. Her eyes flicked down despite herself. The color drained from her face. What is this? Brad asked, leaning in. Loan applications, I said. Short term, high interest. Signed in my name while I was deployed. Brad frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does if you're Tiffany, I said. She needed cash. Fast. Tiffany laughed weakly. You're lying. I slid the next page forward. Signature comparison. Dates. Locations. Forensic match, I said. Independent lab. Brad's jaw tightened. You forged her signature. Tiffany spun on him. I had to. It was temporary. Temporary, he repeated. I pulled out another packet. And this, I said, is the insurance paperwork you tried to activate by declaring me unfit. Murmurs rippled through the guests. A few stepped closer, a few stepped back. My mother pushed through the crowd. Stop this, she pleaded. You're humiliating us. You did that, I said. I'm just organizing it. Brad looked around, searching for an exit that wasn't there. This is a setup, he said. She's trying to ruin us. I nodded once. That part's true. I reached into the envelope again and pulled out a phone. Tiffany's old phone. The one she'd left charging the night she thought no one was listening. This is where it gets personal, I said. Tiffany lunged. Give me that. I tapped the screen. A photo filled the display. Brad shirtless, leaning against a hotel headboard. Another followed. Messages, dates, times, names. The room went very quiet. Tiffany stared at the screen like it might attack her. That's fake, she whispered. It's not, I said. Ask your friend. A woman near the back turned pale and tried to slip away. Someone grabbed her arm. Brad's face hardened. This is private. Not when you leave a trail, I said. A man stepped forward from the crowd. Older, broad-shouldered, military posture that never fades. His hair was gray, his expression carved from disappointment. Bradley, he said. Brad stiffened. Dad. Colonel Harris didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He took the phone from my hand and scrolled through the evidence himself. Slow, careful, thorough. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. You embarrassed yourself, he said, and you embarrassed me. Brad opened his mouth. I can explain. The colonel didn't let him finish. His hand moved once. Clean, sharp, the sound echoed in the room. Gasps followed. Phones dipped, then rose again. The wedding is canceled, the colonel said. Effective now. Tiffany made a sound like air leaving a balloon. She grabbed the table to stay upright. You can't do this, she said. We have guests. The colonel didn't look at her. We had standards, he said. You failed them. He turned to me. You're the sister, I am. You didn't exaggerate, he said. No, I said. I didn't. Brad stared at the floor, one hand on his cheek. You set me up. You walked into it, I said. The colonel handed the phone back to me. I'm sorry, he said. It wasn't an apology. It was a statement of fact. I nodded and put the phone away. Tiffany slid down into a chair, sobbing now, mascara streaking unchecked. You ruined everything, she said again, but it landed flat this time. I leaned in close enough for her to hear me over the noise. You built everything on my name, I said. You don't get to keep it. Around us, the guests started talking all at once. Whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into judgments. The Huntington family stood near the exit, faces tight, already recalculating alliances. My mother stood, frozen hands clasped, eyes darting from face to face. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Brad straightened his jacket like it might help. This isn't over, he said. It is for today, I said. A uniformed officer stepped inside, scanning the room. Then another. The sirens I'd heard earlier were closer now. Tiffany looked up, wild-eyed. Arrest her, she shouted. She did this. The officers didn't move. I picked up the manila envelope and tucked it under my arm. The paper was warm from the room, solid, finished. I turned slightly enough to see everyone at once and waited while the noise reorganized itself around a new center. The first officer stepped forward, hand resting near his belt. We received a call about a disturbance, he said, eyes moving across the room. Who made it? Tiffany shot to her feet so fast her chair tipped over. I did, she yelled, pointing straight at me. She sabotaged my wedding, stole private property, and threatened my family. She's unstable. She needs to be detained. The word hung in the air. Unstable. She liked that one. The officer looked at me. Ma'am, I held the manila envelope under my arm and met his gaze. There was no threat, I said. Only documentation. Tiffany laughed, sharp and desperate. She's lying. She's nobody. She doesn't even have a real rank. The officer glanced at the other officers, then back at me. Can I see some ID? I reached into my clutch and handed him a plain card. No title, no flourish, just a name and a code. He frowned slightly and stepped aside to make a call. My mother rushed over. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly to the officers. Our daughter has episodes. We've been trying to help her. I looked at her. She couldn't meet my eyes. Before the officer could respond, the ground outside started to vibrate. At first it sounded like distant traffic. Then it grew louder, heavier. Windows rattled. A low, steady thrum rolled through the venue. People turned toward the back lawn. A helicopter descended behind the building, wind tearing at the trees, sending napkins and loose programs into the air. Black SUVs followed, rolling in formation, tires crunching gravel with purpose. The room went silent. The officers stiffened. Radios crackled to life. Tiffany's voice shrank. What is that? The first SUV door opened. Then another. Men and women stepped out, moving with practiced precision. No rush, no confusion, just control. The helicopter touched down and powered down slowly. When the door opened, a man in full-dress uniform stepped out. 4 stars on his shoulders caught the light. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is that?" The general walked forward, boots steady on the grass, eyes fixed on one point. Me! My parents rushed toward him, panic flipping into opportunism. "General," my father called out, forcing a smile. "We're so honored. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." The general didn't slow down. Didn't look at them. He stopped directly in front of me, heels clicking together. He stood at attention, then he bowed. "Welcome back, Commander Carter," he said clearly. "The operation is complete." You could hear breathing in the room, nothing else. Tiffany's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The general straightened and turned to the officers. "Stand down," he said. "This matter falls under federal jurisdiction." The officers snapped to attention without question. My mother grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "What did he just call you?" I gently removed her hand. "My name," I said. Tiffany stumbled forward. "This is fake," she said, laughing weakly. "You paid him. This is a stunt." The general finally looked at her. "Just once." "Ma'am," he said, "you are speaking about a commanding officer who has overseen classified operations for the past 5 years. Tiffany shook her head hard. "No. She was nobody. She drove a junk car. She didn't even have medals." I spoke before the general could. "Medals make noise," I said. "My work didn't." The general nodded once. "She was ordered to remain unmarked. No public record, no visible rank." Brad's father stepped forward, face pale. "Commander," he asked me quietly. "Yes," he swallowed. "Then everything she said was accurate," I said. Brad backed away like the floor had shifted under him. "You let me make a fool of myself." "I didn't let you," I said. "You volunteered." Tiffany dropped to her knees, not dramatically, just suddenly, like her legs had given up. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear, I would have never." I looked down at her. "You knew enough." The general turned to a woman from his team. "Begin the audit," he said. She nodded and spoke into her headset. 2 military police officers stepped forward, calm and efficient. "Richard Carter," one said. "Sandra Carter. You are being detained for questioning regarding financial fraud and falsification of federal documents." My parents froze. "This is insane," my father said. "We didn't know who she was." "That's not a defense," the officer replied. Tiffany crawled toward me. "Please," she said, grabbing at my dress. "I'm your sister." I stepped back. The silk moved easily out of her reach. "You treated me like a tool," I said. "Tools get put away." Brad tried to speak, but his father held him back. "Enough," the colonel said quietly. "You've done enough." The general turned to me again. "Your clearance remains active," he said. "Transportation is ready when you are." I glanced around the room, at the empty chairs, the mud outside, the people who'd come for a spectacle and got a reckoning instead. "Give me a minute," I said. He nodded and stepped back. Tiffany was still crying. My mother stared at the floor. My father argued quietly with an officer who wasn't listening. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the ring Brad had given Tiffany. "Glass, cheap, fake." I dropped it in her lap. "I don't keep trash in my house," I said. The room stayed silent as the meaning settled in. Outside, the helicopter blades began to turn again, slow and patient, waiting for my decision. I didn't watch them get taken away. I'd seen enough processing rooms to know how that part went. Forms, questions, silence broken by the sound of doors closing with no emotion behind them. The military police moved my parents gently but firmly, the way you handle people who still think they can talk their way out of gravity. Tiffany kept looking back over her shoulder, searching for my face like it might still save her if she found it. It didn't. Outside, the air felt cleaner than it had all day. The helicopter lifted off, wind flattening the grass that never got its decorations. I walked past the SUVs and didn't get in any of them. I took my time. No one rushed me. That was the difference now. 2 weeks later, the house was sealed. Federal tape across the doors, inventory notices taped where family photos used to hang. I stood across the street and watched an agent photograph the front porch, the same porch where my grandmother used to sit every afternoon, and judge the neighbors with a mug of tea. They asked if I wanted to go inside one last time. I said no. The penthouse didn't fare better. Frozen accounts have a way of shrinking rooms. The foreclosure moved fast once the audit started. Turns out banks get very cooperative when the words Federal Review show up in writing. The glass and steel that looked so permanent folded like cardboard. Brad disappeared from the news cycle within a week. His father made a short statement. "Professional, clean, no excuses. That kind of damage doesn't need commentary. It just needs distance." As for Tiffany, the influencer accounts went quiet. Sponsorships don't survive fraud investigations. Neither do friendships built on proximity to money. The last message she sent me came through an attorney. 4 sentences, no apology, just a request for leniency. I didn't respond. Instead, I signed paperwork of my own. The foundation took shape quickly. truth and honor, simple name, clear mission, legal aid for veterans who didn't have the luxury of public records, financial counseling for families that liked to borrow against uniforms they didn't understand, mental health advocacy that didn't start with locking someone in a room and calling it care. I didn't put my face on the website. I put the work there. The first check cleared the same day the house was officially seized. I smiled at that. Not because of revenge, because of balance. A month later, I drove past the old neighborhood again. Different car this time. Nothing flashy, just reliable. I slowed when I reached the house, now empty, quiet, stripped down to its bones. The agent's sign was gone. The tape too, waiting for its next story. I parked and got out. The yard needed work. Weeds everywhere, fence leaning. I rolled up my sleeves and started pulling them out by hand. Dirt under my nails again. The good kind. A neighbor wandered over curious. "You buying the place?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. He nodded. "Needs fixing. So do most things," I said. By late afternoon, the sun dipped low enough to take the edge off the heat. I sat on the steps where my grandmother used to sit and let myself breathe. No phones buzzing, no meetings. Just quiet earned the hard way. I thought about the party, the laughter, the $20 bill sliding down my jacket. How small they'd made me feel because it was convenient. Because it fit their story. They weren't evil. That was the part people always get wrong. They were just comfortable lying to themselves. And they hated anyone who made that harder. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my hands. The foundation board meeting was in 2 days. A veteran from Arizona needed help with a lien that didn't belong to him. A widow in Ohio had been denied benefits because someone misfiled a form 20 years ago. Real problems, real stakes. I got back in the car and drove away, leaving the house behind for good this time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't own me anymore. People like to ask if I regret not saying goodbye. If I regret cutting ties so clean it scared everyone watching. They want closure wrapped in forgiveness because it makes them feel safer about their own families. Here's the truth I learned the hard way. Closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you take when you stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. So let me ask you this: if the people closest to you only value you when you're useful to their image, do you owe them another chance? Or do you owe yourself the freedom to walk away and build something honest with what's left? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if stories about accountability, quiet strength, and real consequences matter to you, make sure you stay with us for the next one. For a long time, I let people misunderstand my silence. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I understood something they didn't. In a loud world, quiet people are often treated like empty rooms. If you don't advertise yourself, people assume there's nothing inside. That assumption is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make. I learned early that society, especially American society, has a bias toward noise. We reward confidence even when it's hollow. We applaud visibility even when it's manufactured. If someone talks fast, posts often, and looks the part, we call them successful. If someone keeps their head down and works without a spotlight, we call them replaceable. That's not how real value works. That's how attention works. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness, it's strategy. There's a difference. Most people never learn to see passive silence versus strategic silence. Passive silence comes from fear. It's when you don't speak because you feel small, unsure, or intimidated. Strategic silence is the opposite. It's when you don't speak because you're watching, measuring, learning how the room actually functions before you decide where to apply pressure. The strongest people I've known rarely announce themselves. They don't argue to prove intelligence. They don't rush to correct every insult. They understand something simple: every unnecessary reaction gives other people information, and information is leverage. When you stay quiet, people reveal themselves. They show you what they value, what they fear, and how far they're willing to go when they think no one important is paying attention. Arrogant people talk more when they think they're safe. Dishonest people get sloppy when they think you're beneath them. Silence creates space for truth to surface. In workplaces, this mistake shows up every day. The loudest person in the meeting gets labeled a leader. The one who actually understands the system gets labeled support. Promotions follow personality, not performance. Until something breaks. Then suddenly everyone wants the quiet person in the room to fix it. If you've ever been overlooked at work because you didn't play the self-promotion game, here's the hard truth. The system isn't fair, but it is predictable. Visibility opens doors. Competence keeps them open. You don't need to become louder than everyone else, but you do need to be intentional about when and where you speak. Silence doesn't mean invisibility if you control the moments that matter. The same dynamic exists in families, especially dysfunctional ones. Quiet children are often labeled easy, which is just another word for ignored. Their needs are dismissed because they don't demand attention. Meanwhile, the loudest sibling absorbs all the resources, sympathy, and forgiveness. Over time, silence gets mistaken for tolerance. People assume you'll keep accepting whatever they hand you. That's when silence stops being strategy and turns into permission. There's a point where staying quiet no longer protects your energy. It costs you your dignity. Knowing the difference is critical. Strategic silence always comes with boundaries. You don't explain yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you, but you also don't allow repeated disrespect to go unchallenged. The challenge doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be real. Consequences speak louder than confrontation ever will. In social settings, silence can feel dangerous. People equate talking with belonging. If you don't perform, you risk being excluded. But fitting in at the cost of self-respect is not belonging, it's survival mode. And survival mode isn't where growth happens. Here's the uncomfortable reality. People who underestimate you will treat you badly until reality corrects them. Your job is not to rush that correction. Your job is to make sure you're positioned to benefit when it arrives. That means preparation instead of explanation, skill instead of approval, options instead of arguments. When people think you're weak, they relax. They stop guarding themselves. They stop hiding the mechanisms they use to stay on top. That's when you learn how power actually moves. And once you understand that you don't need to announce anything, you just act. This doesn't mean becoming cold or manipulative. It means being disciplined with your energy. Not every opinion deserves your voice. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. Some people only learn through impact. If you're listening to this and you're someone who's often underestimated because you're quiet, because you don't brag, because you don't fit the stereotype, understand this: your silence is not a flaw, unless you let others define it for you. Used correctly, it's an advantage. But silence alone is not enough. It has to be paired with competence, preparation, and timing. Quiet without substance is invisibility. Quiet with substance is leverage. So ask yourself honestly, are you silent because you're afraid to speak? Or because you're choosing when to act? Because the moment you stop trying to convince people of your worth and start building undeniable proof instead, is the moment silence stops looking like weakness and starts looking like control. One of the hardest truths to accept isn't that strangers can hurt you. It's that family can do it calmly, repeatedly, and still expect access to your life afterward. We grow up hearing that blood is thicker than water, that family is forever, that loyalty is automatic. Those ideas sound comforting until they're used as weapons. Family loyalty is often treated like a moral debt, something you owe just for being born. And like most unexamined debts, it gets abused. I didn't lose my family because I was cruel. I lost them because I stopped being useful to the version of them that benefited from my silence. That's a distinction most people don't want to look at too closely. Love, obligation, and exploitation are not the same thing, but dysfunctional families blur them on purpose. Love is mutual. It doesn't require you to shrink to maintain it. Obligation is conditional. It's about roles, expectations, and rules that change depending on who holds power. Exploitation is when those rules are enforced only on you while others are excused for far worse behavior. Many families operate on obligation and call it love. And when you resist, they call you selfish. In American culture, there's a deep discomfort with cutting off family. We romanticize reconciliation. We celebrate forgiveness without asking whether the behavior changed. We pressure people to be the bigger person, which is often code for be quieter, so others don't have to be accountable. Here's the reality: most people avoid forgiveness without boundaries is not healing. It's permission. If someone repeatedly violates your trust, your finances, your safety, or your dignity, continuing to give them access isn't kindness, it's self-neglect. And self-neglect dressed up as morality will destroy you slowly. There's a difference between conflict and pattern. Families have arguments, they make mistakes. That's normal. Patterns are different. Patterns are behavior that repeat even after consequences are explained. Patterns mean the harm is intentional or at least accepted. When someone shows you a pattern, believe them. One of the most manipulative tactics families use is emotional leverage. They remind you of sacrifices they made. They bring up the past. They accuse you of ingratitude. All of it serves one purpose: to shift the focus away from present harm and onto your reaction to it. You're not wrong for refusing to be mistreated just because the person mistreating you shares your last name. Another trap is the idea that cutting contact means you're angry or bitter. That's not always true. Sometimes it means you're clear. Sometimes it means you're done negotiating with people who only understand power dynamics, not empathy. Distance doesn't mean you hate them. It means you love yourself enough to stop bleeding. This applies beyond extreme situations. It shows up in smaller, quieter ways too. Parents who belittle your career choices while funding a sibling's dreams. Relatives who borrow money and never repay it, then guilt you for asking. Family members who dismiss your boundaries as overreacting while expecting endless access to your time and energy. Those behaviors don't improve with patience. They improve with limits. Setting boundaries with family is uniquely difficult because they know exactly where to press. They know your history, your doubts, your soft spots. That's why boundaries must be enforced with actions, not explanations. The more you explain, the more material you give them to argue with. Healthy boundaries sound boring. They look like consistency, like saying no once and meaning it, like removing yourself without dramatic speeches, like not rushing to fill the silence when people are upset that you've changed the rules. If you're waiting for your family to understand before you protect yourself, you'll wait forever. Understanding is not a prerequisite for self-respect. Some people worry that cutting ties makes them heartless. What it actually does is force honesty. It reveals who values you as a person and who valued the access you provided. The grief that follows isn't just about losing people. It's about losing the hope that they would one day treat you differently. That grief is real, it deserves space, but it's still cheaper than a lifetime of quiet resentment. Not everyone needs to be cut off completely. Distance exists on a spectrum: limited contact, conditional contact, clear rules. The goal isn't punishment, it's protection. You decide what level of access people earn based on their behavior, not their title. And yes, sometimes people change. But change that only happens when you're gone isn't change you're required to wait for. The most freeing realization I had was this: I don't owe anyone continued access to my life just because they were there at the beginning. Relationships are not guaranteed by history. They're sustained by respect. If your family treats boundaries like betrayal, that tells you something important. If they frame accountability as cruelty, that tells you something too. You're allowed to build a life where love doesn't come with conditions that slowly erase you. You're allowed to choose peace over proximity. You're allowed to stop proving your worth to people who profit from doubting it. Blood may explain where you come from. It does not dictate what you endure. For most of my life, I thought power was loud. I thought it announced itself, took up space, demanded recognition. That's what movies show you. That's what social media rewards. People standing on stages, holding microphones, collecting praise like proof of worth. Then I spent years around real power, and I learned something uncomfortable. The people who control outcomes rarely need attention. Real power doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It waits until the moment when action is unavoidable, and then it moves once. What most people chase is the appearance of power: titles, status, influence. Those things feel solid, but they're fragile. They depend on other people continuing to agree with the story you're telling about yourself. The moment that story is questioned, the power evaporates. That's why so much of modern success is defensive. People work harder to look powerful than to be secure. Real power is quieter because it's rooted in options. When you have options, you don't need to threaten. You don't need to explain. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You can walk away. You can wait. You can choose the outcome that costs you the least. That's what makes it intimidating. There's a clear difference between borrowed power and built power. Borrowed power comes from money you don't control, relationships that depend on constant approval, or authority that exists only as long as someone else allows it. Built power comes from skills, knowledge, preparation, and independence. Borrowed power collapses under pressure. Built power holds. You see this in financial life all the time. People living on credit look wealthy until the bill comes due. People living within their means look ordinary until an emergency hits, and they don't panic. Power isn't about how impressive your life looks on the surface. It's about how resilient it is when something goes wrong. The same is true in careers. Titles change, companies reorganize, markets shift. If your value is tied to a single role or employer, you're exposed. If your value is tied to skills that transfer, you're insulated. The quiet professionals who keep learning while others chase recognition are the ones who stay standing when the system resets. Control of information is another form of power people underestimate. Knowing what to share, when to share it, and when to say nothing is a skill. Oversharing makes you predictable. Predictability makes you manageable. You don't owe everyone access to your plans, your struggles, or your next move. Privacy isn't secrecy, it's strategy. One of the most important forms of power is having an exit strategy. That applies to jobs, relationships, and situations where you're being tolerated rather than respected. If you can't leave, you're negotiating from weakness. If you can leave, the entire dynamic shifts, even if you never do. This doesn't mean becoming detached or cynical. It means building a life where your survival doesn't depend on anyone's approval. That kind of stability changes how you show up everywhere. You're calmer, more selective, less reactive. People mistake that calm for indifference. It's not. It's confidence without performance. There's also a moral dimension to real power that doesn't get discussed enough. Power reveals character. When someone gains leverage, they show you who they are. Some people become generous, others become cruel. The difference isn't in the power itself, but in the values underneath it. Building real power gives you the responsibility to use it cleanly. Not to humiliate, not to dominate, but to set things right and then move on. True strength doesn't linger in revenge. It corrects the imbalance and returns to purpose. That's why applause isn't necessary. Applause is external validation. Power is internal alignment. If you're chasing attention, you'll always be dependent on it. If you're building capability, attention becomes optional. So if you're listening to this and you feel behind, because you're not visible enough, not celebrated enough, not praised enough, pause. Ask yourself a better question. If everything external disappeared tomorrow, would you still be okay? Would your skills carry you? Would your savings protect you? Would your sense of self hold? If the answer isn't yes yet, that's not a failure, it's a direction. Real power is boring to watch and life-changing to have. It's built in private, tested under pressure, and proven without words. And once you have it, you don't need anyone to clap.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction created by artificial intelligence to heighten drama and emotion. But the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.